report, so I guess I did. Okay. Right, so this week we talked about sustainability reporting, right? How do organizations report on their efforts to be more sustainable? What is sustainability? What does that mean? And at least from an accounting standpoint, if we're reporting on organizational sustainability, what does that involve? Sustainable in what way? Nara?
Doesn't it basically mean keeping games in order responsibly, like for generations and people?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the definition talked about making sure that we're addressing the needs of the current generation without sacrificing the benefits that'll go to future generations, right? So operating in a way that's sustainable for humanity versus society. So what does that look like? What are some things that an organization could sustain that would help contribute to that?
Minimizing their carbon footprint.
Okay, so environmental things like carbon footprint, right? Because the more CO2 that an organization emits, that's going to damage the environment. Some people might disagree with that, but the consensus of climate scientists is that yes, when we burn fossil fuels, methane, carbon dioxide, and others, it impacts the environment. Global warming, climate change, call it whatever you want, but it does have negative impacts. So there's environmental sustainability, but what other types of sustainability are there? How else can you be sustainable as a business? Corporate sustainability, okay. Expand on that. What does that imply?
Treating your workers good.
Okay. So your relationships with your stakeholders, like your employees and your customers. Oh, we have quite a line forming over there.
It's burning outside.
It's raining outside?
Burning.
Burning?
Yeah.
What's burning?
He knows. What's burning outside again, Israel? Over on Laurel.
Oh, there's a fire? Okay. Didn't know that. That does not sound very sustainable, does it?
It's not sustainable. So bad.
But Emma brings up a great point. How you treat your employees and your customers. If you treat them well, that'll help sustain your organization, right? If you don't treat them well, they might stop buying from you. They might stop working for you. Okay, so we've covered environmental sustainability, sustainability with employees and customers. How else can a business be sustainable? We don't care about financial sustainability, right? I mean, that goes without saying that you need to be financially sustainable, right? What else? Is acting in a way that is in compliance with the law and ethical norms sustainable? Yeah. Is being honest with regulators and investors sustainable? Basically, being a good corporate citizen is more sustainable than not being a good corporate citizen. Now, does that mean that you're going to be as profitable? Maybe not, right? There are costs with sustainability reporting. There are costs with being more sustainable. So you might end up sacrificing some of your profits in order to be a better corporate citizen. But there's also the argument that by doing that, your company is going to last longer. You're going to be sustained over a longer period of time, and you will be more profitable overall. And it's really hard to prove one way or the other. So let's see what things we should highlight here. There is this concept of corporate social responsibility. As I mentioned on Tuesday, it's not just corporations that need to be socially responsible, right? Any business needs to respond to the demands of society. If society says, you're addicting our children, or you're causing harm to puppies, or whatever it might be. Doesn't matter what kind of business it is, it needs to be responsible in the eyes of society. But we tend to say corporate social responsibility now. What was my argument regarding that? Why is it we use this term corporate social responsibility instead of just social responsibility? What is it about corporations that makes it even harder for them to be socially responsible?
So trying to make a profit.
Exactly. It's that structure that they have that's designed to maximize shareholder wealth. So what does that mean? Are corporations supposed to make as much money as they can, as much profit as they can, as long as they follow the law? Milton Friedman's perspective? Or corporations make a reasonable profit while also paying attention to the needs of other stakeholders, stakeholder theory, which actually argues that you're more profitable if you do that than if you try to maximize only your profits. Again, hard to prove one way or the other. But yeah, corporations are notoriously tempted to become socially irresponsible. So organizations, again, they report on their sustainability efforts. And they do that because the different stakeholder groups benefit. We talked about some examples of that, right? Investors, employees, regulators, customers, lenders, all of them might have an interest in what the organization is doing to be sustainable. However, you don't have to report on sustainability, right? Not required. You have to report, if you're a corporation, you have to report on your financial performance. You do, right? And you have to follow standards like GAAP or IFRS. But sustainability reporting is optional and it's not universal. So how you report is kind of up to you. So these are some of the benefits of sustainable business practices. We don't have to go through it, but again, you're building better relationships with your stakeholders if you're acting in a sustainable way. We talked about some of these classic case studies where companies either did the right thing or the wrong thing, and how it impacted the company over time. I don't know, does anybody know, does Union Carbide still exist? I don't know if the name is the same. I believe that it didn't go away. It might have changed names, but it's a major oil company. I know Nestle's still around. I know Johnson & Johnson are still around, even though they have in their past done some bad things. Here with Johnson & Johnson, we talked about their positive response to the Tylenol crisis, where there was the, what was it, cyanide? Where there was cyanide in the Tylenol. And they handled that really as well as they could have. They did the right thing, and it helped save their brand image. I did not get to Johnson & Johnson in more recent years. Unfortunately, there's this company that had a great image of being ethical, has tarnished that image. What's Johnson & Johnson done in recent years that's reflected negatively? Oh, there was the issue with aluminum, or was it some, or not aluminum, it's asbestos?
Something like that.
I think it was asbestos in the baby powder or something, right? Okay, so there's an issue. Is that what you were gonna say, Jahar?
There's one with baby poop. I forgot the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which brand. I don't know who's talking about the different one.
Well, yeah, maybe there might be that too. But the big, in my perspective, the big one, they were one of the companies that were out there pushing opioids when they knew that they were excessively addictive. And they profited off of it, just like Purdue Pharma and some of the other companies that did the same thing. So that's very unfortunate. You know, how they went down that road when they knew that it was costing lives and breaking up families and so forth, just for the sake of profits. I don't know how that happens. All right, let's see, what else? We talked about the triple bottom line, people, planet, profit, right? If you adopt that philosophy in your organization, then what you're saying is, yes, we want to make a profit, but we also acknowledge that we're dealing with people, customers, employees, etc. And we need to consider their needs. And we recognize that we exist on the planet, right? And we need to think about our impact on the planet. Are we preserving it for future generations, or are we, using up the resources and polluting in a way that's actually going to make it worse for future generations? All right, let's see. So we pretty much covered that. Obviously, human rights is an important concept anywhere in the world. There is the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, which came out, I think, in the 1940s. Eleanor Roosevelt kind of led the charge of developing that declaration. So the United Nations, for decades, has said people have a right to water, to shelter, to basic dignity. But we look around and we see that, unfortunately, even though people, you could say, have that right, they actually don't have it, right? There are people who don't have a place to live, don't have access to food, water, healthcare, and so forth. So companies in their decisions need to think about, are we helping promote human rights? Or are we taking advantage of people by having them work in sweatshops or selling them products that are addictive, right? All of this, you could say, would be violations of human rights. We talked about philanthropy, charitable giving. Many corporations do it, but do they do it, do they do it only for the tax write-off and to make themselves look good, or are they really doing it to help? And I guess it's good that they're doing it either way, but still, if they really truly are doing it to help, then it's probably making a difference. If they're just doing it for the tax write-off, they're probably doing the minimum possible, right? And not necessarily in a way that's really helping people. We did talk about this word, externalities. Who can tell me what was the meaning of externalities? Okay, exactly. What is the cost that the company itself does not have to bear? If I'm polluting, there might be healthcare costs in the whole community that I don't have to pay. Who pays? The people that get sick. The people that have to operate the hospital on a lower profit because they're having to treat all these sick people that maybe don't even have insurance. Or the insurance companies, they're having to pay for these people, right? But me as a company that's causing the pollution, I don't have to pay. So it's an external cost. And that's not healthy, right? If companies were held responsible for all of their externalities, in some cases they would be. They would not have viable business models. And that would be a shock to our economy, right? We'd have a lot of businesses going out of business because they're no longer profitable. They might try to raise their prices, but if people can't afford to pay those higher prices, go out of business. So if we were to fix that problem, and I'm not even sure how you really would do that, but if we could, we'd probably have to make it a gradual thing where it phases in over a decade or something like that to allow everybody time to adapt. But the way it is now, unfortunately, you could have a farm, and like chicken farms are notorious for this. The runoff, like when the rain comes and takes a lot of the toxic chemicals away from that chicken farm, brings them into the river, and now you've got a polluted river. In fact, if you go to the Gulf of Mexico, where lots of rivers feed down into the Gulf of Mexico, there's a huge dead zone where nothing grows because of all the runoff, primarily from chicken farms and similar farms. So how do we fix it? I don't know, but at least we know what the concept is, right? That's what an externality is. We talked about some of these companies that give hundreds of millions of dollars to charity, which is a good thing. I'm not going to knock that they gave that much money, but most of these companies don't have the best reputations, right? I went into detail on that. Gilead would be the exception. Couldn't find any big scandals on Gilead. So how do you communicate your sustainability efforts on your website, in your annual report, through advertisements, multiple ways to get the message out about the good things that your company is doing? We talked about these positive things that companies have done. I'm sure you remember, Patagonia is very committed to the environment, treating stakeholders fairly. They operate as a B corporation. Walmart's made a lot of efforts to operate in a more environmentally friendly way, which is not only good for the environment, it actually, in some cases, saves Walmart money, like on energy costs. The Grameen Bank, that was the one started by Muhammad Yunus to provide small loans so that people who were impoverished could start their own businesses. And it's proven to be such an effective model. The micro lending is now its own segment of the banking world. Banks have opened up all over the world or adopted this micro lending approach to help empower communities. And they found that the payback rates of these impoverished people starting businesses is higher than your average business owner. And then Gravity Payments was the one where the CEO dropped his pay down to 70 grand, raised everybody else's pay in the company to the same 70 grand. And it's had tremendous impact on the company, right? So those were the positive models. I already mentioned Mr. Friedman. So we talked about how the different stakeholder groups all can benefit from sustainability information. We don't need to go back into detail on that. What else? And then we talked about some of the different initiatives to try to increase the amount of sustainability reporting and standardizing. But here are 3 different initiatives, right? So if you're a company, are you going to follow one of their models? Or are you going to come up with your own sustainability report? Again, you don't even have to make a sustainability report, right? I talked about Coca-Cola and some of the things that they are focusing on and prioritizing, which I think is admirable. If you think about just their core product, maybe not so admirable, right? I mean, everybody likes a Coke or a soft drink now and then, but too much, not really good for you, right? Even if you're drinking diet, that's still not good. But at least they have some positive priorities, which is a good thing. This slide told us the place where most stakeholders would like to get the sustainability information is the annual report. So you might as well, since if you're a corporation, you're already making an annual report, you might as well just add your sustainability information there. Then we talked about some newer developments and trends. Obviously, cybercrime is a major issue, can cause major disruptions to the sustainability of a business. There's terrorism, there's natural disasters, there's social unrest. Like look at the universities and the protests they're dealing with this week, right? It's a complex issue. Some of the protesters seem very reasonable. Some of them seem unreasonable. One saying, death to America, I think that you could say that's an unreasonable protest in America, in the United States, right? But there are protesters out there saying that. But the point is, hey, if you run Columbia University, one of the Ivy League universities, or there are at least 10 other universities that are dealing with this right now, and you've got protesters disrupting your operations to the point that you're having to put all your classes online for the safety of your students, that's an issue, right? So civil unrest can obviously cause issues as far as sustainability. AI brings great promise, right? Allows us to solve complex problems using these large language models and other approaches to AI that can take a ton of data and make better decisions than we could make. Like, for example, there's this game Go, which is a game from Asia, kind of like checkers, but a lot more complex. And they had, this was years ago, they had a competition between AI and humans. And it's gotten to the point that AI can beat humans in chess, it can beat humans in Go, pretty much any game. But what was interesting was AI came up with moves nobody had ever thought of before. Even the experts, even the best Go players in the world were watching AI play and they're like, oh, what did it just do? It just made a mistake. And then they realized, oh, it just won the game. Because it can take millions of Go games, millions of chess games, millions of military battles, millions of product sales, process all the information and recognize patterns and come up with solutions that we as a human, we just don't have the capacity. So it can't do everything that we humans do, but it can do some things much better. So how's that going to disrupt industries, individual companies? Obviously create some issues for sustainability. Jordan?
I remember like last semester I went to this USMB forum thing that had business leaders from here and then somewhere in Asia, I think it was Taiwan, and
Okay.
it was about AI and sustainability and how they connect. I think I mentioned this to you before, but one of the people there was talking about how he runs like a place that has the big rectangle things for computers.
Like a data center?
Yeah, something like that, and how they need to use like water to cool them. And they started using AI to like put the correct amounts of water, which like reduced waste.
Okay, yeah, so AI could take a look at something like that. If you have a big, data farm with all these servers running all the time, it gets super hot. And computers, if they get too hot, they stop working, right? So then you have to cool it. Well, you can just put it in an air conditioning unit, but how do you know how much cooling to do? How do you make sure you're cooling it the right amount in each location? Well, AI was able to do it better than human engineers, right? Which is great. Probably overall saves on energy by using a system like that. And we want that. But what is going to be the impact on entire industries that might get transformed due to AI? Companies that are going to go out of business if they can't keep up? Workers that are going to lose their jobs if they get replaced by AI, right? So there are a lot of sustainability issues involved. Not even going into the dystopian nightmare scenario of will the AI take over? We don't know. Some say yes, some say no. We don't know. But even without that, right, they're a challenge. We'll see. 10 years from now, I'm sure the world is going to be very different than it is today. Hopefully, in good ways. We'll see. Then we talked about, does it make sense to have some sort of a universal basic income? I'm just curious. Thinking about how technology is changing the world, changing the nature of jobs. And theoretically could create a situation where there are fewer jobs to go around. Right? That's possible. That there's so much automation, so much AI, there's just not as much need for human labor. If that happens, should the governments of the world have a system to provide a basic income to people that can't find jobs? We just can't. Maybe they're too old, they don't feel like they can learn the new technology or whatever it is. Should they have some sort of a basic income? How many people would be in favor of that? Some sort of a basic income. Okay, I see 1, 2, okay. And how many people think that's a bad idea, we should never do that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So let's hear the arguments for and against. Those who are for it, why do you feel like we might need a universal basic income at some point? I think, Fernanda and Alexandra, right?
I think I would also say like instead of like the so that you can live it,
Okay.
like then what opportunities like for people to have those jobs
Okay.
and more people to be employment.
Okay. So you're saying either limit the impact of technology, which probably would not be a winning argument because if technology is bringing advancement, we don't want to limit it, right? And if it has negative consequences, like this, just looking at how we've historically dealt with advancements in technology, we want it to advance and then we deal with the fallout. But can we offer job training programs or other jobs? Like during the Great Depression, President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, not Teddy, FDR created all these jobs programs, hiring people to do things even like art. And we're going to hire a whole bunch of artists to go out and make art, right? And that gave people jobs. And it was helpful in stabilizing or restoring the economy. So maybe we need something like that. Did you have anything to add, Alexandra? No? Okay. So, okay. How about those that feel like it's a bad idea? Emma?
I think with the current systems that we have and given government's track record, like you take any government system, just not implemented the way it was meant to.
Okay.
Like you have to qualify and they make the qualifications really different. It's not universal. They don't have good companies set up to manage it. It's denied for the most ridiculous reasons. I think if we had a different government, then yeah, you can implement that. But a lot of the politicians, they want to take more away for the middle and lower classes, but not them.
So basically it would be too bureaucratic with our current government, maybe corruption and so forth that would make it not an effective system.
The tech industries by themselves don't have a good track record anyways, so.
Yeah, these recommendations are coming mostly from the tech industry and they don't have the best interest, the best record of acting in the public interest. Okay. What other thoughts are out there? How's this been done? Have there been areas, we talked about it actually a little bit on Tuesday, Stockton, LA, Alaska, even in other countries. There have been places where they just said, here, whether you're working or not working, you get a certain amount of money. Or in other cases, they might do it only with people who are not working. And what they've found is those people's standards of living in general went up. It makes sense. You have more money, you can afford better food, a better place to live. And the local economies were not necessarily harmed because when people have more money, they can spend it. So it helps stimulate the local economy. It's a similar argument to minimum wage. Like, I think San Francisco raised their minimum wage. Well, okay, I know for sure Seattle, years ago, raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour, which is more than twice the federal minimum wage, or at least it was at the time. They didn't have to do that. And a lot of the small businesses said, whoa, if you do that, we're gonna have to pay our employees so much, we're going to go out of business. We can't afford to pay our employees that much. And there might be some companies that were caught in that situation, but in general, what happened when they raised the minimum wage, a couple things, okay? One thing is the workers that were making minimum wage, now they had more money to spend. And they spent more money in that same area around where they lived and worked. And it helped stimulate the economy, right? But another thing, let's say you were applying for a job that pays $15 an hour and it was going to be a pretty stressful, demanding job. But now minimum wage just got raised to $15 an hour. And you think, hey, I could just go work at Burger King and make the same amount of money and, not have as much responsibility. So then what happens is all the other jobs also have to raise their pay to stay competitive. So the jobs that used to pay 15 now maybe go up to 17 or 18. And the jobs that used to pay 7 through or 18 go up to 20. So it actually kind of lifts multiple people's incomes. And in Seattle, their economy's been thriving. The net impact was actually positive. So higher minimum wage, a basic income. Yeah, there are potential problems and downsides. But it seems like even in today's environment, when the economy is supposed to be actually really good right now, it seems to have a positive effect. And if we get to a place where we're in a bad economy, like during COVID, right? Stock market crashed, companies were struggling, laying people off. Some people lost their homes or, were in danger of getting evicted until there were some rules put out so people could at least stay in their home even if they couldn't make the payments. It was a mess economically. And then what happened? Checks started to go out, right? The stimulus checks. Not everybody got them, but they helped give some economic relief. They helped stimulate the economy. And we did not go into a recession. It kept us, it's part of what kept us from going into a recession. Now, there might be some people that think that that was a bad idea. To me, it seems like it was pretty necessary. There were families getting, it was like $300 to $350 per child per month for a year or so, until unfortunately that program did not get extended. But it lifted large numbers. I want to say millions of children. You can fact check me on it. Millions of children out of poverty. And now many of them are back in poverty, meaning that their families are making under a certain amount of money. So non-economists probably say that just about every week, right? But it seems to me if we're not going to be able to continue creating jobs, gentlemen, really, you can talk outside. At the necessary rate to give people a decent standard of living, that we need to do something different, right? Maybe a basic income is an answer. I think it's better when people work, personally, right? If you just sit back and you're collecting money without having to do anything, that does disincentivize people, right?
Not everybody. But right now,
Yeah,
able to
right. But
opportunities that I couldn't.
exactly, yeah, because you're a self-motivated person. But there are people that will just sit back and they'll waste the money, they'll use it on whatever, drugs or alcohol or something, and that's not a benefit, right? That doesn't create any sustainable benefit. So I would love to see job programs, right? I'd love to see people getting trained to do new jobs, to start businesses, or even to make art or whatever, right? That's better in active society, so I would agree. But we definitely are, we're in a world that's different from anything in history. It's changing so quickly. We're gonna be confronted with some really exciting, but also kind of scary things in the future. And we might need some dramatic new approaches to our economics if we want to help grow our middle class instead of see it continue to shrink as a percentage, right? Because my parents' generation, it was easy to be middle class. You had a job, you were basically middle class. Today, you need maybe 2 or 3 jobs, right? Or you need a job that pays super well just to be middle class. And so if that trend continues, it's going to be problematic. So we'll have to do something different. Okay, so this is the summary slide. All right, there are different people that use financial reports, and there are different people also that will use sustainability reports, right? So different stakeholders will have an interest. Being sustainable, generally, as a business, will help your business last longer. You're acting in a way where you're not going to run out of money, you're not going to burn bridges with your stakeholders, you'll probably continue on longer as an organization. You might not make as much profit as you could, but over time, at least you'll be able to sustain your business, right? So we talked about the different stakeholder groups and how they can each benefit in different ways from the sustainability reports. We looked at some of the initiatives, GRI, SASB, IIRC. I'm sure you'll remember the last 3 exercises in the exercise set were about what each of those attempts to achieve, right? They're all trying to either increase the amount of sustainability reporting or the quality and standardization of those reports. We talked about some of the challenges to sustainability. Innovation is a good thing. We want innovation. But when you're a business and your competitor is innovating, that means you need to keep up, right? Talked about like cyber attacks, terrorism, other security risks, globalization, all the competition from businesses all around the world. All of these pose challenges for businesses today. We talked about AI, the promise it brings, potential challenges to sustainability, and the impact on the economy and society as well, right? We don't only want our businesses to be sustainable, we want our economy as a whole to be sustainable. We want our civilization to be sustainable. We want our planet to be sustainable, right? It's all intertwined. And I think that is everything. Completed our final chapter. Okay. So we have the problem set to do next. Let me stop recording here.